Ever tried to communicate something through a photo but then felt that the audience wasn't understanding, wasn't feeling you? It's not them. It's about how you communicate visually. When I started, I struggled as well. I used to think that my photos were really clever, but in reality, you really had to decipher them, and I was the only one who could do that. You obviously want to avoid this. So today I am going to share with you some, I would go so far as to say, groundbreaking ideas on effectively communicating visually through your photographs. It's best to start with some examples. Look at these faces, the playful expressions. They're kind of contagious. They make me feel playful and want to smile. This is clear communication of emotions. Now these droplets of water on the window. When you look at them, what do you see right away? Wet weather, rain. Pretty simple and clear communication again, right? And this hand gesture. In the context of this photo, we immediately understand, okay, this man is talking, he's telling something. These kinds of elements in my photos are, in a sense, my tools to convey the mood, the feel of a particular scene. They help suggest a larger story that's unfolding in front of the lens. They're crucial to visual communication. I call such elements visual cues. Using them correctly is like picking the right words to express your feelings to a friend. But neglecting them or misusing them is like trying to tell a story with the wrong words or discussing an exciting movie without any enthusiasm. Doesn't make any sense, does it? To make my visual communication more effective, I've developed a whole method around using visual cues in photography. The beauty of visual cues is that they can communicate a lot more than what you can literally see in a photo, and they do this super efficiently. One single visual cue can trigger a multitude of associations. Take this cross, for instance. Yeah, technically it's just a shape, but almost everyone will associate it with Christianity. So it's like a shortcut to a bigger idea. Or something totally different. Here, on the surface, this is a man with a frozen mustache. But beyond this, this is a representation of a very cold winter day. The icy mustache is a visual cue that kind of awakens your senses to the cold, even though this is just a photo. Can you see the crazy potential that opens up if you master visual cues? Just think about how much more impactful your images could be. There are countless ways to use visual cues. If you like my photos, if you get a sense of story from them, if they make you feel a certain way, it's because I've learned to use these visual cues. They're at the core of my approach to photography. And knowing this crazy power and potential of visual cues, I wanted to help other photographers to become better visual communicators too. So I've put together an extensive educational resource on this very topic. It's filled with video lessons, there's a digital book, and practical exercises. I'm actually launching it right now at a special price. The launch will span over 3 weeks. I've prepared 3 YouTube videos. I'll upload these during the launch period and they will help you greatly with your visual communication. Okay, so enough talk about visual cues. By now you're probably wondering, how does all of this apply to the real world? How can I work with these visual cues? Here's my approach. I observe a scene and often certain elements resonate with me emotionally. It could be the interplay of shadow and light, or it could even be the presence of atmospheric elements, like fog or smoke, especially when they're lit in such a way that their presence is accentuated. When an element resonates with me, that element becomes the main visual cue that I build my photo around. If it grabs my attention, it makes sense to focus on this element, doesn't it? There are a lot of times when I start with a particular idea in mind. Like when I set out to capture the intensity of these wrestlers in the thick of their training. I already knew that their expressive faces, the grappling arms, the dynamic maneuvers, these elements were going to give me the intended visual impact. So I'd wait and I'd find the best angle to capture these details. I built my photos around these visual cues, ensuring that they took center stage in my shots. However, even with an idea in mind, I remain open to unexpected, potentially powerful visual cues that might just come up. Perfect example here. The wrestlers kicked up all this dust, and these light beams appeared when the light hit the dust at just the right angle. Suddenly there was an additional element that added a new, almost mystical dimension to the wrestling scene. Alright, let's get a bit more practical. To make this concept of visual cues a little bit more comprehensible and to clarify my own creative intentions, what I do is I categorize visual cues. It'll start to make sense shortly. So the first category is visual cues that hit our senses and engage us on an emotional, on a sensory level. You've seen a few examples of these already. Visually striking weather conditions, a quirky expression, a smiling face, a grimacing face. These definitely stir our emotions. Now take a look at this photo. Would you agree that we feel the mood in this scene? The darkness of the night, the mystery, before we even start thinking, well, what's going on here? So these kinds of visual cues, they evoke feelings first, or some of them awaken our senses before engaging us intellectually. Then we have those visual cues that take the form of symbols. Think about it. After the World Cup, who doesn't associate white and blue with Argentina? And remember the cross I pointed out? Instantly you think of Christianity. In the same way, the dome of a mosque is symbolic of Islam. These symbols are like a portal into bigger ideas. When I said that visual cues can communicate so much more than what's immediately visible, I was especially talking about visual cues that are symbols. Now that you're familiar with symbols, let's get to the next category. Visual cues for traditions and culture. An attire like this one is a cultural detail. A scene like this, there are cultural details or visual cues here, symbolic of culture and traditions. The thing that's fascinating is that for a compelling photo of culture or traditions, the visual cues that you're using don't even need to be understood. The idea is to spark the viewer's curiosity. You simply want them to realize that they're getting a peek into a culture that's different from their own. And then you want them wondering, what's this? What could this mean? What could it be symbolizing? Another category, visual cues that communicate movement, dynamism, action. It could be body language captured in a split second, like this shot here. It feels dynamic. We get the sense of action. Or something like this, the wings of birds frozen mid-flight. Also dynamic, alive. And for those who are a little bit more visually literate, motion blur like this represents dynamism. Or in a photo like this one, chaos. As we dig deeper, things start to get even more interesting. Certain visual cues, when combined, can evoke a sense of story. It's as if objects, when arranged together, begin to make a certain kind of sense, like pieces of a puzzle fitting together. Or people, when interacting with each other, their body language can communicate so much. When there's clearly something happening, someone is doing something, or an event is unfolding, this usually evokes a strong sense of story. In essence, a photo that communicates a sense of story is like a single frame from a film. It suggests a realm of possibilities and ignites our imagination. Finally, let's touch on visual cues that communicate a sense of place, providing geographical or environmental context. These visual cues can anchor a photo in a particular location. Inserting human figures or a car into such kinds of images can evoke a sense of scale and context. You definitely get the sense that this is a vast landscape thanks to the car here, right? Such visual cues allow us to better relate to a place, helping us imagine more vividly what it'd be like to actually be there. So that's a brief rundown of my approach to categorizing visual cues. It's not a hard and fast scientific approach, but by framing everything in terms of visual cues, it's like you're giving yourself a roadmap. You can ask yourself, are you aiming to convey a mood, atmosphere? Do you want the focus to be on the dynamism of a scene? Or perhaps you're hunting for those details that'll help your image convey a sense of story. Now, regardless of the different categories of visual cues, you've probably caught on that my actual goal is always the same. It's to build an image around a visual cues or a few visual cues that communicate something. The stronger and the clearer they communicate that something, the better. And notice that I said there may be a few visual cues. Suppose that a dominant visual cue contributes to a strong sense of mood or atmosphere. This is actually quite a common thread in my work, so if this happens, then I'll usually find myself thinking, what can I do to make the image more captivating, more powerful, more evocative? Example here. I could have just focused on the raindrops on the street. That would be enough to suggest the mood of a rainy day. But by bringing in this other visual cue, a donkey that looks quite miserable being stuck in the rain, I added extra emotional weight to the photo. Now we don't just see a rainy day, but a miserable rainy day. I always try to add a layer of complexity and interest to my photos. And if possible, I'll try to weave in a sense of story as well. I could go on and on about visual cues, but we have covered plenty of ground in this lesson. We'll go into more details and more depth in next week's lesson. And of course, if you want to get really in depth for hours, there's my new educational resource. The key thing that I hope you took away from today is this. The idea of visual cues is a game changer. Once you recognize and leverage them, they can drastically improve how you communicate through your photography. I want you to change how you approach photography. Instead of simply capturing a scene because it's beautiful, I encourage you to start thinking in terms of visual cues. You can look at the photographic process as a search, a hunt for visual cues. It's like an exciting game, a puzzle. You're looking for things to come together with the aim of creating photos that are more powerful, more evocative, more purposeful, and more understandable for those who view them. And that's really it for this one. As always, give this video a like, share it, subscribe to the channel. See ya.